Hey everybody, Ryan Yule here for the Africa Digital Media Academy Introduction to Motion class, and today we're going to be looking at replicators. Now let's just get into Motion here. So replicators are a really fast way of making something that's pretty cool looking and can add a lot of spark and a lot of flair to your motion projects without a lot of work. So first things first, let's go into library here and let's look at replicators. And just the built-in replicators alone, there are a lot of them. And as you can see, if I just hit apply here, that typically what these replicators are doing is they're taking a shape or a picture or an object, pretty much anything that you can put into motion, a picture, a video, and it's replicating it. It's creating multiple copies of it over some type of pattern. So down here, there's all kinds of things you can do. You can apply, and you can see here, let me just delete this and reapply that. So, there's all these different types of things going on with replicators, and it's really just patterns and objects that are changing size, changing shape, appearing, disappearing. So I think the easiest way to kind of explain it is let's actually just create a replicator. Now, again, you can create a replicator from anything. You can go in here and you can make an object and you can replicate that, or you can go into your file browser and you can import a picture and you can replicate this. Now you have to be careful. Really large files are obviously going to really bog down and slow down the computer. So as much as possible, what you want to be doing is using small objects, small pictures. You don't need, if you start using HD video, with 30 replicated copies, it's going to really slow things down. So just be careful what you replicate. So for us, I think I'm going to go into library, I'm going to go into shapes, and I'm going to choose this pink heart right here, and we're going to use the replicator on this. So I'm just going to scale this down a little bit so that it is a little bit more easy to see what's going on. Okay, so we've selected our object that we want to replicate, and just like there was with emitters, right here there is a create a replicator button. So I'm just going to click that, and boom, right away you can see we have replicated this heart. And if I grab this, you can actually see I can dynamically move this layout around. Now if I hit the play button here, obviously there's no animation yet, but we're just working at the moment on the layout of the replicator. Animation comes later. And if I hit F7 for the HUD, you can see we've got things here like the number of columns, so I can decrease the number of columns. So if there's just one column, more columns, less, more rows. I can even do things like, instead of a rectangle, why don't we make it a line? Here's our line with the number of points. Or maybe I can go into the shape, change it to a circle. And there you go. Now, of course, if I hit the I button, there's a lot more options here. So, for instance, I can select circle, but instead of how about filling it, why don't we go to the outline? And now it's along the outline, but let's change the number of points so that there are more points. And there you go. Or let's change the offset. And as you can see here with the offset, it moves it around. Now, as you can tell, because these values are keyframeable, if I wanted to do an animation, I could just as easily start, right here, keyframe my offset, go to the end here, change the value, and now hit play. And of course, now we have an animation. I can even animate the number of points if I wanted to. So of course, here we've got 12 points, and let's say by the end we want to have 35 points. And as you can see here, it adds more. Now, this is one way to animate your replicator, but there's actually something that's designed specifically for replicators. So let me just undo that. So again, any of these points here, angle, you can change. If you want to change the angle of your hearts, you can change it. Anything that you can change here, you can obviously keyframe. But let's go back for a second, and let's just go back to rectangle, and let's go to fill, tile fill. So here's our replicator. Now there's actually a way that you can animate each one of these replicated hearts in kind of a different pattern. So I'll show you what I mean. So I've got the replicator selected. I'm going to go down here into my behaviors, And the behavior I'm going to use is actually right here called replicator. It's called sequence replicator. So I'm going to select sequence replicator. So as you can see, our sequence replicator behavior is now applied. Now again, if I hit play here, nothing's happening. Why is nothing happening? Because we haven't added what we want to the behavior to affect. So right here under parameter, I'm going to select this, and let's look at opacity. Okay, so I'm going to select opacity. Now we've got some values here. Now again, if I hit play, nothing's going to happen yet, but watch what happens. So in the sequencing, we can say, do we want to go to or from or a few other things? But let's start with to. So as you can see, we've chosen opacity, we've chosen to, so we want to go to 0%. So what does that mean? Well, at 0%, obviously the heart's going to disappear. So we want to go to 0%. That means we're going to go from 100 to 0. Now watch what happens when I hit play here. You'll notice that the hearts are starting to disappear, and they're starting to disappear at different times. And this is where the power of the replicator comes in that we've told the sequence replicator affect opacity, go to, so that means it's going to 0%. When you go to something, you go towards it. We're going towards 0%, so that means we're moving towards it being not seen at 0%. Now, here's where we can start to do things like spread. You'll notice if I change spread to a higher number, watch the hearts. They actually start to be affected more together. They're actually, you can see here, if I go, our opacity, they're actually starting to be affected more together. So if I go like this, and so you see how now they're starting to stay, opaque at the same time, and they're starting to disappear at the same time. They're not kind of going in sequence as much. So what that means is that this spread value means how much difference do you want to see between them. So for instance, if I go like this and I turn this all the way up, they're going to actually all disappear at the same time. And you'll see how they all disappear pretty much at the same time? And that's because, as you can see, the spread value says how much difference do you want to see in the replicators. So if I go back to a lower number, like let's say like 13 or something, or 12, you'll see they actually start to be affected quite differently. So the spread is the value that affects how differently each one of the replicated particles or objects changes. Now loops, if I change this up, this will say 3 times. So this is our duration. So our start is here, okay, and our end is here at 6 seconds. So it's a 6-second duration. So if I put loops at 1, that means it's just going to one time do from to 0%, which means if I press play here, it's just one time going to go to 0. Now, what happens? See, now it's all going to 0, all like that. So what happens then if I, for instance, change this to 2? Now what it's going to say is over the course of this timeline, go to 0 twice. So watch what happens now. You'll see the hearts, they disappear like this, and then they come back and they disappear again. So what happens is it's looping over and over. Now this condition is hold, which means that it says, go to 0, hold, and then go back to 100. Well, what if I change this hold to something like ping pong? Ping pong means now it's going to go back and forth. So watch this. It's going to go to 0, going to 0, going to 0, and then it's going to come back from 0, like a ping pong, back and forth. So you can do this with all kinds of things. We can go into here and we can add another parameter. We could go to even something like rotation. So we could say rotate to, and then change this value again to like something like -90. So let's say -90 means it's going to rotate to 90 degrees. So as you can see here, if I were to do it with rotation, in rotation, if I said -90 degrees and I said the spread is quite high, then they're going to start kind of turning at a similar time, as you can see. So here they're kind of turning at the same time. Now, if I were to go down and change the spread to a lower value, like 2, now they're going to start changing at different times. So the spread is how much each of the replicated objects, how differently they're affected by the value. The loops is the number of times it does it over the time here. You know, your end condition, ping pong, means it can go back and forth, or you can just hold. So there's a lot of options going on here. Now, so that's how you can affect certain values of the replicator, things like rotation, color, opacity, scale, so that you're affecting each item kind of differently without having to individually animate them. It saves you a lot of time and can give you some good results. Now, one last thing I want to show before we go on replicators is that besides using behaviors to adjust individual elements within a replicator, you can actually do some other cool things. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete our sequence behavior. And I'm going to go back into the replicator here. And as you can see here, there's a lot of different things like spiral, you know, where you can change the number of arms. You can change, obviously, the points per arm. And you can do all kinds of cool things. You can animate it. But another cool thing you can do is you can actually, in the shape here, I can actually choose, so for instance, circle, you know, you can actually choose, instead of filling it, you can choose an outline, and it does the outline as I showed. Or you can actually go in here into geometry, and you can actually choose the outline of something that's already in geometry. So for instance, if I was to go into the library here, and let's grab like the pentagon here, and let's just bring the pentagon in. Okay, so here's my pentagon. Okay, maybe I'm going to scale it up slightly just so it's a bit bigger here, like so. So now it's been scaled up. Now I'm going to go back into my replicator here and back into inspector. And in the shape source, I'm going to drag my pentagon and bring it in here. And now I'm going to hide it. And as you can see, the hearts now are following the outline of the pentagon. So an easier way to show this is let me decrease the scale on these hearts a little bit. So they're a bit smaller, like this. Okay, so, you know, little tiny hearts, right? So we've got smaller hearts here, so let's go 20 here. So little hearts, and let's increase the points here to like, let's say 30 points. And as you can see, now these are outlining the pentagon. And we can even do things like animate them. So as you see here in the cell controls, and here, let me just make things bigger here so that we can really see what's going on. So there you go. Let's okay, so you can see here in the angle, if I were to change this, obviously that moves them around. But what if I keyframed it? So starting here, I'm going to keyframe this one. So as you can see here, I can add a keyframe, and then I can go to the end. And I can change that keyframe. And now, when it plays, you can see the hearts, they're actually rotating. Now, of course, it's playing really slow on my computer, but trust me, these are rotating. As you can see, there they go. Slowly but slowly, they are rotating. And as you can see, the value here is changing. So that's just a real quick look at replicators and using behaviors or to parameters to affect individual elements of a replicator, or you can use keyframes and different shapes and points and offsets. So there's a lot of things going on here. You can get a lot of different effects with your replicators. And so that is a really quick look at replicators in motion.